I've always preferred driving at night. Maybe it's the stillness. No honking horns, no brake lights stretching into the horizon. Just my headlights cutting through the dark, the low hum of the road under my wheels, and the occasional beat of a lonely song on the radio. Living in Los Angeles, you learn pretty quickly that if you want to get anywhere, you either leave at the crack of dawn, or, in my case, the dead of night. That's exactly what I did when I decided to visit my brother in Austin. It was going to be a long trip, over 20 hours down the I-10. So I packed everything I needed for a month, threw my duffel bags into the trunk, filled my tank, and pulled out of my driveway at 1:03 a.m. First stop was a 7-Eleven 2 blocks from the freeway. I grabbed a huge black coffee, no sugar, and stood for a second in the parking lot, just breathing in the cool night air, psyching myself up for the long haul. The drive started smoothly. Miles flew by in the black stillness of night, a few trucks here and there, an occasional sedan whizzing past. But mostly, it was just me and the asphalt. Hours passed. Somewhere in the middle of New Mexico, deep into one of those endless unlit stretches where the desert just eats up the horizon, I felt it, that slow, gnawing twist in my gut. Hunger. I hadn't eaten since lunch the day before, and the coffee was only making it worse. That's when I saw the sign. Food. Exit 214. The only light I'd seen from miles flickered off to the right. I figured it'd be a McDonald's, or maybe a gas station with some stale sandwiches. But when I rolled off the exit, I saw the unmistakable glow of a Whataburger sign peeking out over the low buildings. The parking lot was mostly dark, save for 2 orange sodium lights buzzing near the entrance. One other car sat idling near the side, some kind of beat-up coupe. No one in it. I figured it was another traveler sleeping off the road. I pulled into the drive-thru. The menu board was lit up, which I took as a good sign. But after waiting a couple minutes with no voice on the intercom, I checked my phone. The place didn't open till 6 a.m. It was just after 4. Frustrated, I took a deep sip of my coffee and leaned my head back. I figured I'd nap for a bit. That's when it happened. Bang, bang, bang. I jolted upright. Someone was knocking, no, pounding on my window. I turned, heart thudding. A man stood outside, hands raised, a sheepish smile on his face. He looked like he was in his early 30s, Hispanic, jeans and a puffer jacket. Harmless looking. Still, something about him made my skin crawl. He leaned in a bit. "Hey man, sorry to scare you, my battery's dead," he said, pointing back toward the other car. "Can you help me jump it?" I hesitated. Everything in me wanted to say no. But I thought about my brother, about how he'd roll his eyes and call me a cynical old man. And I thought about karma. "Yeah," I said finally. "Sure." We aligned our cars. I popped the hood. He popped his. He pulled out jumper cables, older ones, a little rusted, but they seemed legit. We hooked everything up. "Give it a second," he said. "Try it now." He got in his car, turned the key. Nothing. "Probably just needs a bit more time," he said, pulling out his phone and pacing a few steps away. He spoke in Spanish, fast, low, like he didn't want me to hear. I couldn't understand a word, but the tone? It wasn't good. When he came back, he gave me a strained smile. "My buddy said give it a few more minutes. Maybe one more try." I nodded, uneasy now. My stomach was telling me something my brain wasn't ready to say out loud. That's when I heard engines. 2 of them. From opposite sides of the building, 2 pickup trucks barreled into the parking lot, their headlights cutting through the dark, tires squealing as they boxed me in. I didn't wait. I dropped the jumper cables, slammed my hood shut, and hit the lock button on my fob in one frantic motion. The stranger was still by his car, but now he wasn't smiling. He was grinning, like this had been a game all along. I bolted. There was a small patch of trees behind the Whataburger. I sprinted into them, branches whipping my arms and face. I ducked low, crouching behind a bush, trying to silence my ragged breathing. Voices followed, Spanish, urgent, multiple men. I counted at least 3, maybe 4. They fanned out. I heard them yelling, snapping twigs, stomping through the brush. A flashlight beam swept nearby. I flattened to the dirt, barely breathing. And then, like a gift from God, Silence. They gave up. Or maybe they just assumed I'd run farther. Either way, they left. But then, my car alarm. The shrill sound cut through the quiet like a knife. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. When I finally crawled out and made my way back through the trees, my stomach dropped. My car looked like it had been through a war. The back window was shattered. My trunk was open, contents completely gutted. Every bag, every piece of clothing, my laptop, even the stack of cash I'd tucked under the driver's seat. It was all gone. The coupe was gone. The trucks were gone. Just me, my broken car, and the aftermath of a very real nightmare. I called 911. The sheriff arrived about 20 minutes later. A sleepy, worn-looking guy with a heavy New Mexico accent and tired eyes. He was kind, but I could see the writing on the wall. They usually strip the plates. Sometimes they don't even bother putting any on, he told me. You won't find those guys, not without a miracle. We filed the report. That was that. He asked if I had family nearby. I shook my head. Then I'd suggest heading home. Ain't nothing left to do out here. So I did. I drove the 2 hours back to LA, the car rattling with every bump, the wind howling through the broken rear window. I passed the same 7-Eleven I'd left from 8 hours earlier. Same parking lot. Same clerk behind the counter. But I wasn't the same. I walked into my empty apartment, sat on the floor, and stared at the wall. I didn't cry. But eventually, it hit me. Not just the loss, but the feeling that something inside me had changed. I'd stopped to help someone because it felt like the right thing to do. I thought I was doing well. But I was wrong. That night didn't just rob me of my things. It robbed me of something deeper. My trust. That quiet, solid belief that if you put good into the world, it'll come back to you. I still drive at night. Old habits die hard. But now I don't stop. I used to think the scariest part of moving back home would be seeing all the things I'd outgrown. Childhood posters are still hanging in my room, the sound of my parents' voices through the thin walls. But that wasn't it. It was the silence. Out here in rural central Pennsylvania, the nights don't hum like they do in Philly. There's no thump of music bleeding through apartment walls, no cars rumbling by on wet pavement, no muffled shouts or laughter echoing up from the street. Just quiet. Cold, heavy, creeping quiet. After the breakup, I didn't have much of a choice. I left Philadelphia with a few boxes and a fractured heart, thinking it would only be temporary. My parents were kind enough to take me back in without asking too many questions, and I found a job again at the same urgent care clinic I worked at in high school. Only now, they stuck me with the night shift. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. I told myself the solitude would be good. Give me time to think, heal. But it wore on me fast, like sandpaper on skin. I was always tired, my sleep schedule a wreck, and most days I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. That morning started like most. Bleary-eyed and dragging my feet, I clocked out at 7:02 a.m. and shuffled toward my car beneath the buzzing canopy lights. I hadn't eaten since midnight, so I figured I'd grab something on the way home. There's a gas station about 10 minutes from the clinic, one of those 24-hour places that always seems like it's on the edge of being condemned. But they have decent breakfast sandwiches, and at that hour, I wasn't picky. I pulled in and parked near the pumps. The lot was empty. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead like they were struggling to stay awake too. The clerk barely looked up as I paid for my food and headed back outside. That's when I saw a man. He was standing next to my car, thin, mid-40s maybe, with a too-tight denim jacket and sunken cheeks. His skin looked weathered, like he'd spent too many nights under open skies. His eyes were what got me, though. Wide, watery, unblinking. "Morning," he said. I paused, keys in hand. "Hi. You heading home?" I didn't answer, just nodded, hoping he'd take the hint. He pointed to the empty spot 2 pumps down. "My car's dead. Battery. You wouldn't happen to have jumper cables, would you?" Something about the way he asked, casual, almost rehearsed, set off a flicker of unease in my gut. But I pushed it down. I was raised to be helpful and kind. I don't have cables, I said, half truthfully. I did. They were buried under a pile of moving boxes in my trunk. Sorry. He smiled like he already knew that. No problem, he said, stepping back. Drive safe. I got in my car and locked the doors before turning the key. As I pulled out, I checked the mirror. He was still standing there, watching me. I tried to shake it off. Just a weird guy at a gas station. Every small town has a few. By the time I got home, the sky was softening from deep blue to a pale gray. The porch light was still on. My parents were probably still asleep. I let myself in with the spare key, hidden, like always, under the third stone to the left of the porch steps, and tiptoed into the kitchen with my bag of food. I didn't want to wake anyone. I sat at the table, peeled back the sandwich wrapper, and took my first bite. And then I heard it. Click. The unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. I froze. My heart kicked against my ribs like it wanted out. I hadn't relocked it, but that wasn't the sound of a doorknob turning. It was the lock itself, turning from the outside. "Mom?" I called out, voice low. "Dad?" Nothing. I stood slowly, every muscle tensed. The house was still. Too still. I moved toward the staircase and crept up. I didn't want to panic. Not yet. Maybe one of them had gone out early and was just coming back. But when I pushed open their bedroom door, both were still in bed. My mom stirred, blinking at me in confusion. "What is it?" "The front door," I whispered. "Did either of you go outside just now?" "No," my dad said, already sitting up. "Why?" I told them. He didn't say a word, just threw on a robe, grabbed the small wooden bat he kept under the bed, and headed downstairs. My mom and I followed. There were no broken windows, no forced entry, just the door, closed and unlocked. The spare key was gone. We searched the first floor, living room, bathroom, den, room by room, hearts pounding in our ears. But it wasn't until we reached the dining room that we found him. He was crouched beneath the table, knees pulled up, hands folded like he was hiding in a game of hide and seek. It was the man from the gas station. He didn't move when we saw him. Just stared, his face blank and pale in the dim morning light. I screamed. My dad surged forward, yelling something. Maybe a threat, maybe just noise, and tried to drag him out. The man kicked, struggled, twisted away. My mom and I joined in, grabbing, pushing, hitting. It was a blur of motion and sound. And then he was gone, darting through the front door and disappearing into the trees beyond the edge of our yard. We called the police. They arrived within minutes, but by then, he was long gone. The officer was kind, but realistic. "No plate numbers?" he asked. I shook my head. "Anything missing?" "No," I said. "Nothing." He didn't take anything. The officer exhaled, then nodded slowly. "You got lucky. He probably didn't expect you to be awake. People like this, they rely on routine. They watch. They wait." That was the part that gutted me. He'd followed me home, used the spare key I'd so casually returned to its hiding spot. I kept playing it over in my head, how easily it had happened. The gas station, the key, the doors unlocking. How close I'd come to never knowing he was even there. That day, my dad changed the locks. Every window was checked, double-checked. We moved a heavy bookshelf in front of the dining room window, just in case. The spare key? We don't keep one outside anymore. I still work the overnight shift. Still drive home with heavy eyes and a paper bag of food in the passenger seat. But now I check my mirrors a dozen times before pulling into the driveway. I lock the doors the moment I get inside. That morning reminded me of something I'd forgotten living in the city. That danger doesn't always wear the mask you expect. Sometimes, it crouches quietly under your table, waiting for the moment you let your guard down. I've always liked driving at night. It's when the world feels the most honest, dark and quiet, stripped of the distractions that daylight brings. I've done a dozen solo road trips over the years, usually up and down the East Coast. This time was no different. I was heading from Boston down to North Carolina to see an old college buddy. He just had a kid, and I figured it was time to show up with a cheap bottle of whiskey and meet the baby I was supposed to be Uncle Chris to. I left around 10 p.m., planning to drive straight through the night. I had my coffee in a thermos, podcasts queued up, and the kind of wide-open highway that always makes me feel a little more like myself. Around 2:30 in the morning, somewhere in rural Maryland, I pulled off to a rest area. Not one of those big turnpike stops with Starbucks and fast food joints. This was a quiet one. A stone building with vending machines and a few old picnic tables out front. 2 other cars in the lot, both parked nose in and dark. I figured someone was napping. The building was lit by flickering overheads that cast long, twitching shadows across the walkway. I needed to stretch, maybe splash some cold water on my face and, more urgently, use the restroom. So, I headed inside. The men's room was old. Not dirty exactly, just the kind of place that hadn't been updated since the early 90s. Pale green tiles, yellow light. That smell of industrial cleaner and something vaguely organic. And that's when I saw him. A man. Standing in the far corner of the restroom, not using the sink, not at the urinal. Just standing there. His back to the room, his face turned directly into the tiled corner like a child being punished. He didn't move. Not a twitch. I stopped in the doorway, one foot still outside, heart skipping in that involuntary way it does when something just feels wrong. At first I thought maybe he was drunk, or sick, or just one of those people who didn't like company and found their own ways to be left alone. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt that tightness in my chest start to rise. "Hey," I said. "Nothing." I cleared my throat. "You good, man?" Still nothing. No reaction. No shift in weight. No sound of breath. I felt a chill climb up the back of my neck, but I walked inside anyway. I didn't want to be rude, or paranoid, or the kind of guy who judges someone for being a little strange. I kept my eyes on him as I walked past and into the stall, closing the door and locking it behind me. But I couldn't go. I just stood there. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was tired, that the guy was maybe asleep standing up or dealing with something I didn't need to know about. But my body wouldn't relax. Eventually, I gave up. I flushed anyway, just to maintain the illusion of normalcy, and stepped out. He was facing me now, still in the same spot, just turned. His eyes were wide. His mouth was parted, just slightly, like he was in the middle of whispering something I couldn't hear. His face, God, his face. Not angry, not sad, just off. There was a slackness in it, like a mask not molded to a real human face. I didn't say a word. I didn't look away. I backed out the door, slow and steady. And once I was in the cool outside air, I turned and walked calmly, too calmly, back to my car. I locked the doors the second I got inside and sat there for a few seconds with my hands on the wheel. My heart was pounding. I checked the rear-view mirror, the side mirrors, the shadows in the parking lot. No sign of him. Then I started the car and drove. I told myself I was being dramatic. I even laughed once, nervously, trying to shake the chill off. But the truth is, I've been around enough weird situations in my life to know when something is more than just off. And that man, that expression, it was burned into my memory before I even got back on the highway. 20 minutes down the road, I saw another rest stop and pulled off. I still had to go. My bladder hadn't forgotten what I'd denied it. This one was nicer, cleaner, more modern. It felt safer. The parking lot was empty. I walked inside, relieved to find the bathroom completely vacant. Bright lighting, soft music from the vending area outside. It almost felt normal. I took the stall farthest from the door, relieved myself, and let out a long breath. I was just about to flush when I heard footsteps coming in from the outer door. Then they stopped, right outside my stall. I looked down. Boots. Black, heavy, and covered in road dust. Just standing there, facing me. No movement, no sound. My throat went dry. My brain screamed that it was him, that somehow, impossibly, the man from the last rest stop had followed me. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. I hit speaker and held it low. 911, what is your emergency? I spoke loudly. On purpose. I'm in a public restroom off I-95, I think near exit 83. Someone followed me from another rest stop and they're standing outside my stall. I think I'm being followed. I feel unsafe. The silence outside the stall cracked. The boots moved. One slow step, then another. And then they were gone. I waited. Still on the line with dispatch, who was calmly confirming my location. I unlocked the stall and opened it slowly. The restroom was empty. A few minutes later, a state trooper showed up. He checked the building, then walked me out to my car. Nothing had been touched. No signs of tampering, no damage, no footprints in the dirt. Just my car sitting there, quiet under the lot lights. The officer was kind, said I did the right thing, offered to follow me back to the highway. I told him I'd be okay. And I was. The rest of the trip went by without incident. I reached North Carolina just before noon, greeted with baby cries and the smell of breakfast. But I didn't tell my friend what had happened. It took a few days for the tightness in my chest to go away. For me to stop checking mirrors, looking over my shoulder at gas stations, hesitating outside of public restrooms. Even now, I think about that night. How quickly something can shift from ordinary to horrifying. How thin the line is between safety and danger. And how, as a man, I'd never expected to feel hunted. That night, I learned something. Fear doesn't care who you are. You can be 6'2", broad-shouldered, confident behind the wheel of your car, and still feel like prey when something you can't explain follows you into the dark.